All righty. Welcome back to another Rolling to Win episode. Today we are live with Dr. Deb Barnett, who happens to be a badass mentor. But she does a lot more than that, and we're going to get into it with her here. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you. Here we go. Hi, Dr. Deb. How are
Hi,
you today?
John. I'm well. Great to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, um, the first thing that caught my eye was that you are a badass mentor. So, what is a badass mentor?
Well, I help women step into their confidence so they can share their gifts, speak their truth, and be all that they came here to be.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So, confidence has a huge role to play in that. What would be like your, I guess, ideal sort of situation of somebody that you can take from this level to the next level?
Well, often I work with women who either are going through a career transition, meaning they've been in corporate and they want to do something more of an entrepreneurial nature, or I have one client I'm working with right now, for example, and she's had this burning desire inside to write a memoir and get her story out. And she knows like this is what she wants to do. She can feel it, but has had some blocks come up around her confidence when sitting down to actually write and get the book out and start speaking about it. So I've been supporting her with that, and she's
Hmm.
making some great progress, which is excellent.
Awesome. That's awesome. So, I don't assume that you just jumped out of the gate with this. So, what led you down this path of becoming a mentor to people?
Well, I guess I sort of joke that I've always either been in the performing arts or the healing arts, sort of as a broad definition of my path. I started out actually in children's theater when I was young, and
Mhm.
I was a theater major for my first 2 years of college. And then I thought, it just feels like there's something more. I'm not quite feeling completely satisfied. So my advisor and mentor at the time said, "What about this?" And she handed me this little card. You know, the cards that you get in magazines, and it says, like, you know, tear this out and send it in to get
Mhm.
more information. So she handed me one of those cards from a magazine, and it was for a small school in Boulder, Colorado called Naropa. And I
Mhm.
flipped through the catalog and I said, "There's something here to this." And so when I transferred to Naropa, I switched to psychology. And then I was a psychology major for my second 2 years of undergrad, and then did a variety of different healing modalities. I studied
Mhm.
Ayurveda, and I know you had a lovely guest on
Mhm.
recently speaking about Ayurveda. I studied down in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the Ayurvedic Institute.
Okay. Wow.
And I studied massage therapy and skin care. I was an esthetician for several years. Um, and then there was this nudge. I had an opportunity to meet with a wonderful gentleman who was a meditation teacher. And I said, I feel like I'm at this crossroads and I just don't know what to do. And I've done this and this and this and this. And he
Mhm.
said, I think you would make a big splash in psychology. So I thought, okay. I remember years ago, I think I was in seventh grade, and somebody had told me you would make a good counselor. And I said, "Well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to sit and listen to people, talk about what's wrong all day." But when this gentleman said something, I said, "Okay, this is at least the second time I've heard this." So I took it into consideration, and I just started researching some suggestions for graduate schools and applied to a program which is a combined master's and PhD in psychology,
Mhm.
and pursued that. And although the school was very holistic and integrative in nature, my focus was in clinical psychology.
Okay.
So I've been practicing as an integrative clinical psychologist since 2006.
Mhm.
Um, and along the way, of course, I was talking with people, but I found I really, really enjoyed helping people once they were at a, we'll say, just okay level, not struggling from in the pits of despair,
Mm,
but saying like, okay, now that I'm over the intense depression or the intense anxiety, now what do I do? I said,
mm.
okay, let's roll up our sleeves and go. So helping them really um, share their gifts, like I said, and speak their truth. I really
Mhm.
found that I loved that, and it energized me, and the clients were responding well. So that's sort of what has led to me into more of a mentoring and coaching
Oh, okay.
shift in my career.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I mean, it's very commendable to. I mean, people need somebody to listen to them and help them work it out. That's a fact.
Absolutely. Yes.
Um, we think in our own minds that we've got this. We all have great ideas, right? But then if you don't get them out of your head or onto a piece of paper or talk to somebody about them, then they're really great ideas until you figure out that they aren't, or maybe
Right.
they are, and you just need that little nudge to go in the right direction there. Now,
Exactly.
Naropa University is sort of a special place, right? Like they have like what is their foundation there?
It actually has a Buddhist foundation.
Mm, hmm.
Originally, the founder came from a Buddhist orientation, but
Hmm.
he was very clear that this was not a Buddhist school. So we
Mm-hmm.
had people from all different traditions teaching there. There was we it was really interesting just in the variety of classes that I took. My minor was in Native American traditions and ecology. So
Mm-hmm.
we did, all different courses. I took studied with a curandera from Mexico in terms of traditional healing techniques from
Yeah,
Mexico. So we had all different. It was a really rich melting pot of all different traditions and people from all backgrounds of life. So it was a really rich experience that I had there. I loved it.
sure. In comparison to say like the sole Western modality of psychology, um, what makes it a little better?
Well, both at Naropa and then at my graduate school, which at the time was called the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. Now it's
Hmm.
called Sophia. Um, but I would say it's a holistic perspective on psychology. So in terms of, if we think of Western traditional psychology, and of course I'm really simplifying this, but
Hmm.
a lot of psychology was focused on what's going on in the mind, from the neck up, so to
Right.
speak, and just dealing with the thoughts. And there's a modality in psychology called cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's like,
Hmm.
change your thoughts, change your behaviors, then you're going to change your outcome, which is really effective and is still widely practiced. And there's also consideration of what's going on in the body.
Hmm.
What's going on physically, because of course that's going to affect your outlook on life. What's going on in your community? We are not just individuals operating in our lives. We are interacting with family members and friends in our larger community, and what's going on with the earth. Even that's where
Mm.
the minor at Naropa of an eco psychology is being considerate, I guess, to
Hmm.
simplify it, of the health of the earth and that we have an impact on the earth. And so looking at relationships from all different angles and the whole holistic relationship of your mind, body, and even spirit for some people who relate to that, and then in a larger community perspective.
Right. Right. So, it's sort of a focus on like heart, mind, even gut health, and then the
Mm-hmm.
fact that we're all sort of maybe this. I think it's funny when I think about it this way: is that we're sort of like a flower of earth ourselves,
That's right. It's
right?
beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, like just as the flower comes forth and blooms, so do we. Then we draw back to the earth, just like a flower.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
and
Mm,
and I noticed that I homeschooled my kid, and we I was just really just sort of looking at it. He's like, Dad, it's going to come back up, but it's dead right now. It's like, interestingly enough, that's a lot like the Hindu principle of reincarnation, right there.
yeah.
And when we looked at all that stuff, the older I've gotten, the more I realize that these things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, and we tend to think that way. Like the
Mhm.
humans seem to think that they're not nature when in fact they are nature. So,
Very much so. Very much
um,
so.
what is the like your main focus is confidence, right? So,
Yes.
what led you to sort of lean into the confidence part of things?
Well, I would say it's probably been my own journey. If I
Okay.
look at what
Mhm.
have I overcome and struggled with, it's a lot has been my confidence. And I would say as a child, I was labeled as shy. And I was
Mhm.
the quiet one in the classroom. And, I heard, oh, Deb's shy, she's quiet. And it's so true that after we hear things from people around us, we start to believe it.
Mhm.
And whether it's true or not, sometimes we don't even question that. It's just like, okay, everybody's saying this, it must be true. And then I thought, but wait a second, the fifth grader who marched up the hill to the children's theater,
Mhm.
in fifth grade and said, I'm going to audition for that play. Is that shy? No, not
Right.
necessarily, So I knew there was this part of me that was fully expressed and was confident. And yet there were times where, yes, it was true. I felt, am I enough? Is this
Mhm.
good enough? And I worked so hard in school to try to be good enough and studied for hours and hours and hours to get the A, as if I needed to prove myself and
Mhm.
prove my worthiness, that I
Mhm.
was good enough and lovable enough. And, this showed up in all different ways. And, I'd like to say that, after I got my PhD, I had, finished that one. But to be fully transparent, no, there were even times after getting the PhD and building this successful practice that I still had doubts like, do I know enough? And is this
Mm.
going to be enough? And am I worthy enough? So it's been an ongoing, um, I guess, challenge.
Sure.
And I'm grateful that yeah, little flickers of it come through now and then. But overall, I would say I'm much more confident than I've been in the
Mhm.
past and can use the wisdom and knowledge and life experience I've had to hopefully pass that on to others and support
Mhm.
them so that they feel less alone and have some steps that they can take to
Sure.
make their path a little bit easier.
Someone to help believe in them. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We inherit a whole lot of these limiting beliefs from family and like you said, maybe the students around or even teachers or whatever. But um, these limiting beliefs that we need to overcome, like, do you have some sort of exercises that you would
Mm.
recommend for somebody who has like limiting beliefs?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges I see in so many people when overcoming confidence or just inner battles, if you will, is that there's this negative inner critic.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes it's not just one inner negative critic. Sometimes there are multiple different voices that can be positive or negative, but often when we're thinking about what's the block to confidence, it can be the inner critic that comes up. So I like to say, think about this inner critic and when it might have come into your life. Maybe it's when you didn't get picked for the soccer team when you were little and you
Mhm.
thought, oh, what's wrong with me? Why don't they like me? And then you hear this negative voice saying, well, you're not good enough. You're not fast enough on the field, or, your kick isn't strong enough, whatever. And then this sort of self perpetuates and stays with
Mhm.
us for years and years and years sometimes. So if that inner negative critic came on board, I say, even though it feels negative, trust there's some positive reason it came into your
Mhm.
life. And if that is
Mm.
true, what might that be? Maybe it's, well, it wants to prevent you from being hurt again in the past, in the
Right.
future,
Mhm.
And so that negative inner critic is kind of like a personal assistant, if you will, that maybe you hired years and years and years ago when you were 10 years old, but it's still operating today as if you're 10. So
Right.
its job description of what help means today needs to be updated. It needs a job promotion. So
Mm-hmm.
give it a new job, turn to it and look at it and say, hey, if you really want to help me, which I believe deep down you do, even though how you're presenting sounds quite negative, if you want to help me, this is how I could use your help. Do
Right.
this. Point out some of my strengths. How am I winning?
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a great way to help me. So there's so many ways that we can transform this inner critic or transform the blocks so that we're strengthening ourselves and all parts of us as
Mm-hmm.
we go.
So is that inner critic sort of similar to like Jung's analysis of the shadow?
Yes, very much so. Yeah,
Mhm.
all different traditions and philosophies can look at it from a different perspective, but I would say yes. The shadow's interesting because it can manifest in different ways.
Mhm.
Sometimes the shadow will be a behavior that we engage in that maybe we're not so proud of. Like maybe
Right.
we, will sneak like the quart of ice cream at 11
Mhm.
p.m. and we don't really want to acknowledge we do that, but we do that anyway. And we'll sort of like,
Mhm. Eat it before somebody sees you.
somebody knows, and
Right.
then put the container in the trash underneath the other trash. you know so sometimes that's like shadow behavior. I say,
Mhm.
how do you know it's shadow behavior? If you're not going to want it to be in public, if you're not going to want to
Mhm.
talk about it at the holiday party, there's a good chance there's some shadow behavior going on. So that's one way it can present. And the
Mhm.
other way it can present is just this, like you said, yes, an inner critic, a negative voice telling you you're not worthy enough, not good enough.
Mhm.
And that's another way it presents. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
Wow. So I'm sort of familiar with like the fully integrated version of self. Not that I'm there, or I like to think that I'm on my way, but um, how does somebody integrate that into their life and sort of reset that programming?
one way is owning it and saying,
Okay.
you know what, I do this,
Mhm.
and loving that. So whether it's eating the ice cream, if we want to stick with that, or, um, you know, it could be the negative self-talk. It could be any
Mhm.
habit that we really don't like or anything we do that we don't like. It's easy to want to reject that part and say,
Mhm.
no, I don't like that. That's the bad part of me, or that's the part I don't want to look at.
Mm.
But I
Mhm.
say, you know what? The more you push against that, the more likely it's going to pop out at unexpected times, when we're unconscious, a little
Mhm.
tired. Debbie Ford was really wonderful at writing about the shadow. And she had this metaphor. She said, imagine one of those big beach balls, colored beach balls that you blow
Mhm.
up. And she said, think about that as the shadow. And when we're at the beach, we can hold it under the water. And we like, I don't want anybody to see this.
Mhm.
And yet, after a while, with the waves splashing you around and the currents, your arms are going to start to get tired. And sooner or later, you're going to slip. Your grip will slip, and that ball, which is the shadow, is going to go boom and
Mhm.
pop right out. So it's much better to say, hey, instead of trying to hide this, I am in a safe and healthy way going to own, yes, this is a part of me and it's not bad. I'm going to love this aspect of me as well. And when you do
Mhm.
that, it softens the resistance, because we create stress and resistance inside by like, this is who I want to be, but I'm aware there's this part of me that I don't like. And those two
Right.
parts can be in a battle, and that creates
Sure.
a lot of stress and tension. But if we can accept all parts of ourselves, that stress and tension can lessen significantly.
Right. Right. What did Freud say? It was like suppressed emotions are still there and will manifest themselves in like the ugliest of ways if you don't deal
Hmm.
with them.
That's right. Yeah. It's not like
So
we can just sweep them out the door and say, bye. bye, I'm done.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. This emotion, I don't want it, so let's give it the boot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I say a lot of folks have a hard time with that because if I mean myself included, like if there was a behavior that I'm hiding from somebody, then like it's that shame and embarrassment that comes along with it. But
Hmm.
what I've realized now, I think, is that that is more, again, programming. Like
Yes.
unless you're out here stealing stuff or something, that's causing direct harm to other people. Um, so, how does one sort of get over that? You know, I guess embarrassment of something. Like it could be any number of things, I
Hmm.
suppose. But
Yeah. I think, sort of turning towards it as if it's a part of you and saying, hey, I'm going to take you,
mhm,
under my wing or under my arm and say, you know what, even though you feel ashamed and embarrassed and worthless, you're still worthy of love.
mhm,
You're still worthy of my attention. And the more acceptance and attention we give it, it doesn't have to act out, because often those shadow parts of us are aspects that want attention, that
mhm,
we've ignored. Like, why are we eating, if it's ice cream, why are we eating
mhm.
the ice cream in the first place? Like,
Okay,
what's driving that? Maybe
right.
it's comfort, maybe it's
Mhm,
pleasure. And so saying, okay, if that's what this behavior's its message, so to speak, is trying to give to me, how do I get that need fulfilled in a healthy way? Is
mhm,
it comfort? Is it pleasure? Okay, there are plenty of ways to get comfort and pleasure in much healthier ways that I'll actually feel better about, both in terms of not feeling so ashamed, but also the outcome will make me
mm,
feel healthier. And then that becomes self-reinforcing of, oh, actually, if I do this, find a healthy way to meet that need, I feel better. I'm less ashamed. Psychologically and physically, it's a positive upward spiral. But even another way, or even before that, is just being authentic and owning it.
mhm,
Like, hey, I'm aware that this is a part of me, and yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, but this is what's going on. And having the courage to be truly authentic and owning all aspects of yourself, even the messy parts, even the parts that you would often want to hide from others.
mhm,
When we can be authentic and own those parts, not only is it huge relief, like, oh, I don't have to be perfect, I don't have to look like I have it
mm,
all together,
mhm.
because really none of us do. None of us
Sure,
do,
sure, right.
but when we're authentic and we own those messy parts, those imperfect parts,
Mhm,
others around us, they also go like, oh, phew, that means I don't have to be perfect either. It's giving others around us permission to be authentic. And when everybody drops into a place of more authenticity, I feel it drops us into our hearts. We're
mhm,
relating from a more genuine perspective instead of this is who I want you to see me as.
mhm.
It's more authentic, it's more heart centered, and it's so much more satisfying and fulfilling.
Right. It allows a chance for that, like agape love. Right.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We see the humanity in one another and we realize that we're not that different when it comes down to it at the heart level.
Right. Right. That was one of the hardest things for me, I think, was that other people have the same sort of, well, everybody has the same drive as I do, like we all have the same basic, what is it, pyramid of needs or
Enough needs.
pyramid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maslow's
Yeah.
hierarchy of
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah. The
Hmm.
hierarchy of needs.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not as well versed as my fiance. She studies psychology. She's really
Oh,
into it.
oh,
I,
that's
I read
great.
a whole lot of Jung to get through a whole lot of my stuff, and Robert Johnson thereafter.
Hmm.
Um, I really like I kind of like the archetypes, and thinking about
Mm.
the archetypes as uh, manifesting themselves as even the Greek gods, or even a Christian god, or just whatever. The
Yeah.
gods came out because they had to come out.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
yeah, yeah. So without that suppression there. So
Yeah.
kind of to change gears just for just a second here. Um, where are you from? Like, where did you, like, you went to school in Colorado and Arizona. So are you from the mountain country out west?
I'm a New England girl, native New
Okay.
England girl. Yeah, I was
Mm,
born in Boston
mm,
and lived in Boston for the first few years of my life until I was 5.
mm-hmm,
And then my family moved to New Hampshire when my dad, the business he was working, the company he was working in
mm-hmm.
at the time was Digital Equipment Corporation. So they moved him and us to New Hampshire. And so I lived in New Hampshire from the time I was 5
Mm-hmm.
until I went away to college
Okay.
after high school. Yeah, and that's when I went out to Ohio, like I was saying, for the first 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there to Boulder. Although there
Okay.
was a year off in between Ohio and Boulder while
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to find myself. I took a year
Right.
off to do some spiritual seeking, if you
Sure.
will.
I
Yeah.
think that's good for anybody to do. Is
Yes.
like, instead of this hustle, 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 go to college, get a job, get married, have kids, work 65 years, 40 years, whatever it is until you're 65, and then enjoy a few years of life before
All
you you,
right.
you, you check out. Um, Probably enjoy it the whole time. That's where I'm at
Exactly.
now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
I,
like that
I've
bumper sticker, don't postpone joy. Do you know?
right there. You
Life
go.
is too
Yeah.
short.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I was having a hard time actually genuinely loving people before I fell off a roof, to be
Wow.
honest.
Mm.
And the night before it happened, you know, I still would say I inherited Christianity, so I still pray.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
prayed that I would be able to feel for people like Jesus felt for people, like to actually
Mm.
love people.
Mhm.
To kind of tell you where I was at the time, I was in between contracts, and I decided I'd go back home to where an autistic nephew was living in his own home. My mother had bought him a home so that he had a place to live that he could
Mm.
afford on his stipend every month.
Yeah.
But I was like, let me check out your house. And he let me in his house, and it looked like a hoarder house, right? Like he would
Wow.
eat something and then just drop it like where he was. It's like, man, we got to get you cleaned up. So I made the
Mm.
arrangements to get him cleaned up. And I got it cleaned to the point where I was staying with him for just a little while. I think I spent about a month.
Oh,
And
wow.
the night before I prayed that, and then the next day I fell off a roof.
Oh my goodness.
And
Oh.
it took me from being like, I'm strong and don't need anybody, to, well, now I need help, and now I have to
Mhm.
cope with how I get help from people.
Yeah.
And really, like, looking at it, I'm kind of like, so being strong and independent is not loving people.
Mm. Mhm.
From that, I mean, it's good to be strong, it's good to be independent, but you still need people in your life to show love to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like we don't have to do it all on our own. And just
Right.
thinking we have to doesn't mean we're necessarily, that's being independent doesn't
Sure.
necessarily equate to strength. So,
Right. Right.
wow, I'm sorry you had to go through that. And yet,
I'm
it
living my
sounds
best
like,
life now, though.
yeah,
You
it's like,
know.
in some ways that, the greatest challenge can sometimes turn into a beautiful gift and blessing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, yeah.
For sure.
Uh,
So what are some of the things that you find challenging that you have encountered that were life changing for you?
well, I would say probably the biggest challenge was I was, you know, I'll just back up a little bit just to give sort of a context. I
Hmm.
was fortunate to be raised in a pretty generally healthy household. My
Hmm. Hmm.
mom she said, when I was born, like she decided she was going to be the best mom and do everything
Hmm.
right to have a healthy pregnancy and, natural childbirth. So she went through every single different type of, diet, whether macrobiotics or, vegetarian, and, you name it, we went through it. She even went into this, I'm going to make our own tofu phase, like
Oh, wow.
she did it all, like really all the way. So, and then she is a Reiki teacher. She learned Reiki in 1979. So for those of you who are not familiar with Reiki, it's a very gentle, hands-on healing modality, great for stress reduction and, sort of a great mind-body technique. And so I grew up with Reiki. It was just like normal,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was my background. And I continued to be healthy for my entire life, no smoking, not drinking alcohol, so in terms of like doing everything right physically, I had done that. And so in 2015, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh, wow.
And it was devastating because it didn't, well, breast cancer, any kind of cancer, as you know, any kind of like huge tragedy where your life as you know it suddenly comes to an abrupt end and you're faced with this challenge, whether it's, as your injury and illness of breast cancer, it's like, what I thought, how I thought life was suddenly isn't. And it happens, in a second.
Right.
For you, the fall, for me, the diagnosis. And I was like, not only was it shocking, but it didn't make sense because I had no family history. And I had done everything right in terms of my healthcare. So when you go to the hospital and they're trying to figure it out, and you have to go through this questionnaire of, do you do this? Do you do this? And I'm like, no, 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 no. I even went through the gene testing. No, like that didn't. So there was no reason they could point to. So it was extremely challenging. And, what they sometimes in some traditions they refer to as like that dark night of the soul experience, where it's like, I had to figure out some way to make some meaning out of it. And I said, okay, there's got to be some reason. I don't know what that is, but there's got to be some reason, or else I need some reason to help me get through this. So I said, if what I'm going through can someday help other women, then it will have been worth it.
Right.
And that's what gave me some peace. And I would say even helped me to keep going at times.
Right.
And I did everything in terms of treatment. Excuse me, I'm getting a sip of water.
Certainly.
I did the traditional of surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. I also did integrative and complementary modalities. I did acupuncture, Chinese herbs, Reiki, and a lot of visualization. A lot. Okay. I would listen to YouTube guided visualizations. I would think about, okay, I have decided I'm going to get through this and I'm going to be healthy again. I've just decided, okay, body, this is what we're doing. Because I firmly believe that the body does listen to us. It has its own innate intelligence. That's what helps us to heal. And so we can actually engage with and communicate with the body, and the mind and the body are so intricately connected. I mean, that's scientifically proven now, that I would say, this is what I want to do, and this is what it's going to look like. And I think about, I love nature. So I would think about hiking, and I think about being outside on a beautiful spring day. And I love to take pictures of flowers. I live very close to the Biltmore estate in Asheville, North Carolina.
I thought I looked, over your profile, and I thought that was the Biltmore. Yeah.
Yes. And so
it's been a long time since I've been there, but yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things they do is they have these gorgeous gardens that were designed when they built the house. And so every year, starting in March, the tulips start coming up, and every season, like there's another layer of flowers that blossom. I loved, your metaphor of we're like a flower. So this is something I loved. And I would just imagine I'm walking at the Biltmore Estate, taking pictures of flowers. I'm hiking in the mountains. I feel the breeze on my face. I feel the sunshine. And it helped me. And I'd think about, being with friends and family members and like, this is happening. This is what we're doing. And I just visualized that over and over and over again. And another thing I did was in a scary moment, which was when I would be sitting in the hospital getting ready for chemotherapy treatment. And after having lived and been so vigilant about
Right.
what's going into my body in terms of what I'm eating, thinking about, this, on the one hand, it's a toxin, a poison,
Right.
to
Yeah.
help kill the cancer cells. They're going to inject this into my body. And I'm saying, yes, that was a
Right.
scary moment. So I would actually, send some Reiki, some positive thoughts to the chemotherapy and say, I'm just going to imagine this is liquid love. This is liquid love that's coming from this bag that's hanging on this hook above my head, going through this tube into my arm. And I'm just going to know that this is coming into my body to help me heal.
Okay. Wow.
And so that was a lot of sort of reframing and using my mind, as well as all of the other things that I was doing. So it was a very integrative approach to healing that helped me to heal. And I was fortunate that, they said after I went through all the chemotherapy, they said, we're going to do another surgery to see if we get what they call clean margins at the site.
Okay.
And they said, we don't expect that we will the first time just because of the type of cancer you have, And it was, so I was diagnosed in June of 2015. This was March of 2016 when they did the post chemotherapy surgery. And they said, we don't know why exactly, but you have clean margins.
Wow. Wow. So
Yeah.
that's pretty quick, right?
It was pretty quick. Yeah. Now that wasn't the end. Yeah, there was other, adjunct therapies they wanted me to do. But in terms of like, what was it? Who knows? We can't say. We didn't do a controlled study about exactly what it was, but I got clean margins, and that's what mattered to me.
Right. For sure. Well,
Yeah.
what did your support system look like at that time?
Primarily it was my husband. I was married at the time. And so it was my then husband, and he was amazing. Like we started actually treatment in Boston at Dana-Farber Cancer
Okay.
Institute. And I stayed with my parents who lived near there. And then when it was an every week kind of a thing, well, it doesn't make sense to drive from Asheville to Boston every week. That's much too long of a drive. So I transferred I'm in the western part of the state. We transferred to the Chapel Hill, which is a 3.5 hour drive. But my husband would drive me, every week. He was amazing caregiver. And I had friends, some contact with family, although that, they were far away. So, and there were some, challenges going on. So that added to some of the challenge. Everything's good now, but it's the emotional challenge of going through that was just as difficult as the physical challenge. So it took a lot of mindset.
Right. For sure. Because I mean, you hear so many horror stories with cancer and whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, a lot of people don't make it out on the other side.
Yes.
It's pretty sad.
It is.
So how important is visualization, like in general? Because this isn't something people normally do, right? Is visualization.
Yeah. A lot of people are not familiar with it, or if you haven't, experienced it, you think, oh, well, how can that work? I think it's extremely important. I think, like I said, the body's listening to us. I think the subconscious mind is as well. And so that by focusing and saying, this is where I want to go, this is the experience I want to have, it sort of lines up all aspects of us to focus us. So I was like, I'm going for health. I'm going to get through this. And it's like, okay,
Hmm.
the mind and body get on board. And they've done some interesting studies with children who are going through cancer, and they've said, okay, we want to pretend you're playing Pac-Man. It was that
Mm, hmm.
video
Hmm.
game. And so they
Right.
said the Pac-Man is going to eat up the cancer cells. And so they're just having the kids visualize this, but kids can visualize. They know what Pac-Man looks like.
Hmm.
It's like, that wonka, 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 wonka. And
Yeah.
so
Right.
it's like, if that's what the Pac-Man is doing, if the Pac-Man is eating up the cancer cells, and these kids are getting better,
Right.
and, they're just visualizing this happening.
Sure.
So I think it's very powerful. I don't think we even really understand exactly why it works yet, but there are a lot of
Hmm.
things that we don't understand that actually work. So I think
Right.
more and more research and time will be coming out.
Hmm.
But I think, yes, I think visualization is very important.
As far as um, when did you find out 100% that you were now cancer free and able to sort of put this thing behind you as an experience?
So that, like I said, yeah, March of 2016, I got the "you have clean margins" message. And
Okay.
then I did another year of what was kind of like a chemotherapy. It was different, a
Okay.
different formula, if you will, but it was
Hmm.
just to help the immune system. And then I actually had to have another surgery in July of that year, because
Hmm.
then they put me on a regimen of MRI, mammogram. One would happen every 6 months. So I forget why that I had another MRI, but at that time, but then they said, oh, we're seeing a spot on the
Hmm.
MRI light up, and we
Hmm.
think it's benign, but it's going to keep looking like there's something there unless we take it out. So I had to have yet another surgery in July
Hmm.
of 2016. And so then, yeah, I guess it was probably about until March of 2017. Then I was still receiving that
Hmm.
infusion therapy. And then now I'm on every 6 months. And I also took some medication for a while, a um, hormonal blocker to
Hmm.
block
Hmm.
estrogen from the breast cells. I took that for several years. And now I'm just on every 6 months, either an MRI or a mammogram
Just kind of to
routine.
make sure. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious there. My
Yeah.
a former spouse of mine, her mother died of renal cancer, um, and it was pretty quick. I think maybe 6 months, something like that.
Mm,
And it was a hard time for. It
yeah.
was a hard time.
Yeah.
Um, that's tough stuff to go through. Now, sort of back to the visualization thing, though, and let's steer away from visualizing the healthy thing. Um, what I mean is, like, people have a goal. Like, I'm thinking of like a vision board, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I've never even put one together. Perhaps I
Uh,
should. I mean,
oh,
so
it's so
so
much fun. Yeah. I've
right,
done it several times. Yeah.
yeah. What is the power behind that? Do you think?
I think it's sort of again like telling your subconscious mind, like, this is what I want to experience. This is what I
Mm,
want to
hmm.
experience. So I'll share a fun experience I had of a vision board. This was
Hmm.
probably 2011 or so.
Hmm.
And so I said, okay, I'm going to create a vision board. Well, what do I want to experience in my life? Well, I want to start horseback riding again. I grew
Hmm.
up riding horses. I was one of those little girls, 5 years old. I want a pony, And so my parents like, okay, well, we're not going to get a pony, but you can have
Hmm.
horseback riding lessons. So I started
Hmm.
riding when I was 6. Eventually, I did get a horse later on, but I hadn't ridden for many years, and I was like, I love that.
Hmm.
I love riding. I love horses. I really want to start riding. So I put a picture of a woman riding a horse on the vision board. And then I was
Mhm.
like, well, I grew up with little white dogs. I think I'd like a little white dog again. So I put up a picture of a little white dog. And then I was like, well, I want to meet a man, and I want him to be, conscious and kind of spiritual. So I put up a picture of a guy sitting on a dock on a lake, and he just, has his hands in a prayer position.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, like this is kind of getting to the feeling of what I want to be experiencing in my life.
Mhm.
So, and I put it up, and of course I had to look at it, but I didn't really do anything else with it. I'd see it, in my peripheral vision as I would walk by it, but it's not like I sat and held it in my lap and intensely focused
Right.
on it. I didn't do that. It was just in my space, right? In the
Sure.
apartment where I lived
Okay.
at the time. So shortly thereafter that, I connected with someone who told me, they have a stable at the Biltmore Estate that you don't really see to the general public, but it's an
Mm.
equestrian center and you can
Mhm.
take lessons there. So I researched it. I called them. I started horseback riding at the Biltmore Estate, which was
Oh, wow.
amazing. I did that for
Yeah, no
years.
kidding.
Loved it. It's like it would just bring delight just to go there, and
Mhm.
I rode an amazing retired thoroughbred. He was had retired from the racetracks, named
Mhm.
Silas, and we just bonded. It was this heart connection with this horse. So I rode him for years. I loved that, and then I met this guy. I was online dating at the time,
Mm, mhm.
and he said, well, I'm interested in psychology and I'm interested in Reiki. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And eventually, we started dating, and um, he actually came. It was a funny story. Like we sort of, missed paths at first. And then he
Mhm.
said, oh, he found me online again because he wanted to take a Reiki class, and found my website where I mentioned my mom, Deb Barnett, Reiki teacher. And
Okay.
so then he's like, wait a second, I met this woman online a year or two ago. So we reconnected around the Reiki first, and then we started dating. So then, after dating for a while, when I met him, and I mean, we had been dating, I forget like how many dates, but he invited me to his house for dinner.
Mhm.
And I rang the doorbell, and he opened the door, and I walked in, and in the middle of his kitchen floor is this little white dog. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love little white dogs. And she
Yeah.
goes, oh, woo, 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 woo. And he just looked at me. He said, she only does that when she's really excited to see somebody. And so this little white dog and I just like instantly
Yeah.
bonded. So, these things, and yeah, eventually we got married. So I got the guy and the little white dog in one
Right.
package. So, and this is, again, like, can I prove it was because I had these things on my vision board?
Mm.
No, but I did have them on my vision board, and they
Right.
did come into my life.
Sounds a lot like a synchronicity.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe that's what it does is, you visualize, and then then your mind focuses on these things when you're not even focusing on it, all these details or whatever. Or
Yeah.
I have heard this too, that we're like, our consciousness is kind of like this internet. So we send those
Yes.
waves up, and then
Mhm.
they just sort of come down at other conscious levels, and come
Yep.
out that way,
Yeah, because
which
having
is wild if it works like that. I don't know. I
yeah,
mean, it's all fascinating to me.
it is
I guess we'll all
fascinating.
find out the mystery one day.
Exactly, 'cause it's similar to, have you ever had the experience, John, where you're thinking of somebody and you're like, "Huh, I wonder how they
Mm,
are. I wonder how they're doing," and, like, I don't know why I'm thinking about them, that they've just been
sure.
on my mind for a few days, and then they call you or they
Oh
email
yeah.
you, and you're like,
Right.
"This is wild. I've been thinking about you," and, like,
Right.
"What's that?" It's like,
Yeah.
how does
Yeah.
that work?
Sure.
So,
Sure.
it's
Uh,
fascinating.
it's the consciousness internet.
Yes, exactly, I love that,
Very
the
similar to
consciousness
like,
internet.
yeah, yeah, and I've seen. I was reading studies. I couldn't tell you the studies 'cause I'm not. When I read something, I just kind of go, "Wow, that's cool," and I might take notes on it. But say for instance, like you have like a colony of rats on the West Coast and a colony of rats on the East Coast. It's
Yes.
like the colony of rats on the East Coast might have discovered something. And then
Hmm.
within weeks, the colony of rats on the West Coast also discovers that same thing or starts that same behavior.
Right. Right.
And there's got to be something to that we as humans just don't even see or understand.
Hmm. Hmm.
So hence the visualization thing, it makes a lot of sense to me. It's almost the same as putting a prayer out there for your needs.
Absolutely. Which, there's more and more scientific research that the power of prayer
Hmm.
does work. There's something to that. I remember I was in graduate school and we would look at these things like random number generators and these wild sort of far out things, like why do they all line up, why do random number generators start lining up
Hmm.
when there's like right before some natural disaster or major world events like the
Oh, okay.
towers, like why does this happen? And they're saying, when you pray, when a group of people come together to pray and
Hmm.
praying with an intent to send positive energy, things happen. I believe it
Hmm.
was James Twyman who did this research, and he got together a group of people. And at the time, I believe it was in Jordan, that there's a lot of conflict. And he said,
Right.
we're just going to focus and pray on, that there's more peace and calm in this part of the world. And they had
Hmm.
everybody praying on this part about more peace and calmness in this part of the world. And there's a statistically significant drop in the violence after that incident. So
Wow.
it's like we're starting to figure out, again, can we say why? No, the research doesn't show why exactly,
Sure.
but it does show there's something's happening.
Some connection. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Some ethereal thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
just wild. Like the more that humans discover, the more you realize that you don't know things.
Yes, yes, which is kind of exciting because then we get to be eternal students and constantly learning and growing,
Yeah,
which
for
I
sure.
love. I love. I used to go get
Same
my
here.
my teeth cleaned, and you go about every 6 months or so,
Hmm.
and I would sit down in the dentist. In the waiting room of the dentist's office, and the
Hmm.
dental hygienist would look at me and she'd say, "Okay, what are you studying now?" Because she always knew I would be up to something new. Like,
Right.
what's the latest? So, I'm always curious and always wanting to explore something new.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. If you're not learning, you're not growing. Right?
that's
That's just
so
the
true.
long and the
That's
short of it, I think,
so
for sure.
true. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we're coming up sort of on our hour. Um, what is something that you would like to uh, leave the viewer with, like some final words of wisdom?
I would say, just to sort of summarize, what some of the themes we've been talking about,
Hmm.
I believe that we are all here to share something. Like, we all
Hmm.
have our unique gifts.
Right.
And you might not even know exactly what that is. But if
Hmm.
you don't, I would say start focusing on, how do you want to feel? If
Hmm.
you're showing up as your authentic self without having to be anybody or put on an act, and you're just showing up authentically,
Hmm.
fully expressing yourself, how do you want to feel? What
Hmm.
do you want to be doing? Who do you want to be hanging out with? And what will that feel like when you're living this life of full confidence, full self expression, sharing your gifts, speaking your truth? What will that feel like?
Hmm.
And just focus on that feeling. And then I think things will start coming to you. Like, what about this? What about this? What about this?
Right.
Like the way radio waves go out and you're like, okay, this is how I want to feel. This is who I want to be
Hmm.
hanging out with. This is what I want to be focused on.
Hmm.
And more pieces, like the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, will start dropping in and things will come across your path. Sometimes I say I use my email inbox as like my little message box of like, hey, think about this, and I'll be like, oh, I don't even ever remember signing up for that person's email newsletter, but
Right.
here's this message coming into my email inbox. So just be open and thinking about you living your fully expressed, confident life. What does that feel like? What does that look like? And pieces will start to come to you, little hints, and follow those breadcrumbs.
Right.
And just watch what can unfold.
Right. Be open to those thoughts that happen upon you
Yes.
miraculously from the muse.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And I'd love to offer your viewers a gift. We were talking about the inner critic earlier, and I
Mm-hmm.
have an ebook that I'd love to give to them with
Okay.
some practices about transforming the inner critic. Maybe the easiest way is I can send you the link, and we could put it like in the video description or something below, and then they can have it. But yeah, it
Sure
has.
thing. I'll pop it on the comments here for the
Yeah, that'd be
YouTube.
great. Yeah.
So what you got?
And that, and then, you know, you can have, it's a great sort of tool or resource to have. And we all have at one point or another, we might not even call it the inner critic, but this negative voice that can be nagging at us, and some great practices in this book that you can have that might be able to be a helpful resource and tool.
Certainly. Can you call it out, and I'll just go ahead and type it in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me just pull it up here.
Picasso said that the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away.
Yes. Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
So it's my website, which is DRDEB.com/inner-critic-ebook.
ebook. Perfect. We've got it popped in there. Cool.
Excellent.
Well, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you sticking around with me and hanging out for a little while today, taking time out of your busy schedule.
I had so much fun chatting with you, John. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go ahead and give the, I guess, exit, and I'll talk to you momentarily. Okay.
Sounds great.
All right. There you have it. We have spoken with Dr. Deb Barnett, the badass mentor about all kind of stuff today. And she's wanting to give us a free ebook at her website, which is drdebbarnett.com. And the link is in the comments here. And then I'll get over to the Facebook and put the link into the comments over there too. So go ahead and like, subscribe, tune in next time. Next time is going to be Sunday. It's going to be father-son. You know, I talk a little bit about how my son has overcome drugs and all kind of stuff. So we're going to have a conversation with him Sunday with another friend of mine. He's up in Michigan, but tune in then. And until next time, keep rolling to win.